You're listening to the REI Marketing Nerds Podcast, the leading resource for real estate investors who want to dominate their market online. Dan Barrett is the founder of AdWords Nerds, a high-tech digital agency focusing exclusively on helping real estate investors like you get more leads and deals online, outsmart your competition, and live a freer, more awesome life. And now, your host, Dan Barrett.
Hey guys, welcome back. You're listening to the second part of last week's episode. Let's jump back in.
So you talk to so many people and you've been around for a while now, right? How do investors blow themselves up? Because it strikes me as you have a martial arts background. There was a saying, right, in jiu-jitsu where it's like every black belt's a white belt that didn't quit, right? And so how the biggest danger, I think, to investors is not so much failure, it's failure to the extent they are blown up. They are out of the game, right? There's no more getting back to it.
Yep.
And you've gone through moments of failure, right? But you didn't blow yourself up. So when investors blow themselves up, how do they do that? And how can people avoid it?
Another great question, Dan. You're really good at this.
Look, dude, I don't know what to say. I'm just, I'm just an honest man trying to make an honest living podcasting, apparently.
The things that I see that blow people up, I'll tell you, I'll start with the number one thing. This is what I feel like is the biggest, far and away the biggest pitfall. And then we can talk about some supporting things that don't happen or happen poorly that cause it. But what I find is they try to grow too fast and they do it, again, at the expense of the future. They're only thinking about today and they try to grow too fast and it implodes on them. And the reason it implodes on them, the deeper reason, is they're growing too fast, which is not inherently bad. But when they grow fast and you start with this business that where you're kind of doing everything and it's real small, and then you have hyper growth, the thing that people don't incorporate soon enough are KPIs. And it's not sexy. It's not fun to talk about necessarily, but they don't know their numbers. And so they're running this business that everything, they're keeping track of it in their head because they're only doing one deal at a time, for example. And then they get some advice. They see people who are doing it faster and better, and they start throwing fuel on it and it starts growing. And while it's growing, they lose track of profitability, of losses, of expenses. They start losing track of all that stuff. And they get this rocket out of the atmosphere and realize, holy shit, this thing isn't holding air. We're losing air. This is a disaster and we're in the atmosphere right now. And by in the atmosphere, I mean, we owe a lot of people money. We've borrowed a ton of money. We didn't do a lot of due diligence when we were buying these properties. So they're not really going to cash flow like we thought, or we can't sell them for what we thought we were going to sell them for because we're in a declining market, whatever it is. They start getting ahead of themselves. And they find themselves in a really bad situation where they don't have the cash flow to pay their investors. They're trying to sell the properties, but there's something inherently wrong with that market or with their initial analysis, or there's too much work for their team to do. So things start falling through the cracks. And so their rocket starts to split apart under the pressure and they ultimately end up failing or just crashing and burning.
So I love that. So first of all, if you think KPIs are boring to me, you don't know me very well because they're
not boring to you. They can be boring to invest. Investors tend to be great at finding deals and negotiating deals and renovating and all this stuff. But when it comes to keeping track of the spreadsheets, it tends to be a real yawn fest for them, and they don't like it. You like it, but a lot of investors don't.
People, you need to listen. If you haven't found the joy of the spreadsheet, I didn't know it either. And now I'm way into it.
Yeah.
But I literally went through this process recently where for AdWords Nerds, for the agency, right? It's a different business than an investor, but obviously we work with investors, and really sitting down and saying, what is the KPI we need to measure? Because in many ways too, which KPI you measure ends up impacting your behavior, right? Bear Stearns were killing it in terms of their KPI. It's just that their KPI didn't include hey, are we going to explode soon? Right.
Yeah.
And so, similarly for me, for a while at AdWords Nerds, we were tracking lead volume per client. And we were saying average client volume is wants to be above 20, or, what percentage of our client base is above 20 leads a month or a week or whatever the number was. Right. And I was moving that number up, moving it up. And then at some point we were like, oh, wait, we don't actually care about lead volume. We just care about deals generated. Right.
Yeah.
And I can get a ton of leads if I just say like, I don't care who they are.
Yeah.
Right. So then we had to kind of change our behavior again. So I love the fact that you're mentioning it. So when you look at an investing business, what are the KPI that you, for example, you tell your students to really focus on? Because early, just like you said, they're in the business, they're laying the carpet or whatever. They don't want to do the spreadsheet, right? So it's hard. If people don't want to do it, it's kind of the equivalent of the, eat your vegetables kind of thing.
Yep.
What do you tell people to focus on? Like, what's the 80-20 there of like, here's really where you want to keep your eye on, especially early?
Yeah. So it's a question that I would answer differently depending on the stage of the investor. If it's a highly sophisticated investor, it's going to be different. But I'm not going to, we can talk about that, but I'm going to focus more on like the 80-20, like you said. 80% of the people probably listening to this, they should be tracking marketing dollars spent. Okay. Whatever that means. You track your marketing dollars spent. The leads that generates. Okay. So I usually tell people that I coach that a call, for example, like let's just say, for example, we're going to talk about direct mail or even like pay-per-click if it's driving them to a website with a phone number or something where they're getting calls. A call or a contact, a response from marketing, whatever that is different than a lead. And I don't know if you, like in your business, Dan, if you kind of slice it up like this, but what I've learned is it's important to differentiate between a response to marketing and a lead. A response to marketing is, hey, I got your postcard. I'm never selling. I hate you for sending this and never call me again or never reach out to me again, right? That's a response to marketing. Exactly.
I'm calling the FBI.
It's not a lead.
Yeah.
A lead
is,
but it's
FBI.
marketing. I saw you online or whatever it is, and I do have a house, and I think I might want to sell, and I need to sell, and like here's my situation. Now you're into a lead. Okay, so marketing dollars spent, marketing responses generated, because I want to know that number. Leads generated. They have a house that they could sell. Appointments generated from those leads, contracts generated from those appointments, and then revenue. Like those are like the super basic KPIs that you have to know to be successful. And then, then there's like some nuances like appointments that cancel, like your cancel rate for your appointments. And that is an indicator of how good your appointment setter is or how good of a job they're doing of determining marketing response versus lead. And then how many contracts are falling out before you're able to close on them. I feel for you, Dan, in your business, because you can generate leads, like you said, but people are measuring what you do for them by deals, but there's so much that happens after your involvement that you can't control. Mm-hmm. And I think we touched on this last time we talked, but I had a student of mine say, my marketing's not working. And it turns out the marketing was working phenomenally. It was their salespeople that were terrible, and they had to fix that. And they were blaming it on marketing. Yeah. And it was sales. And so that happens, I'm sure, with you. But you didn't ask me this, but I think it's something that people should hear. And it sort of goes along with what we're talking about. There was a guy that I listened to in a workshop once. His name was Jeb Blunt. He's a sales coach. And he talked about in his workshop something called your Moneyball number in your business. And if you're familiar with the movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt and I can't remember who else was in it. But anyways, it was about this guy, Billy Beane. He was the manager of the Oakland A's. And anyways, what he did in baseball was he used data to build a team instead of using like, oh, this guy's like a great pitcher. This guy's a great fielder. He figured out on the Oakland A's back when he was their manager, he took all the conventional wisdom that people use to recruit and to sign players. And he said, I don't care about any of that. I want to figure out what is the number one indicator of success of a baseball team. And what he came up with was on-base percentage. That was the one statistic that was the biggest indicator of success and failure. And so common wisdom was, I want someone who can hit. What he said was, I don't care if they hit the ball or if they get hit by the ball. I want them to get on base. That's all I care about. They can bunt, they can get hit with the ball, they can walk, they can get a hit. I don't care. And so he figured that out and he built his team and tons of success and movies are made about him. So Jeb Blunt in this workshop said, you and your business need to find out the one thing, the one data point that is a keystone, that if you know this one data point, it will point to all of everything that ails you and you can solve most of your problems by this one data point. And in my business, what I figured out after spending this whole workshop and really going deep was my Moneyball statistic or my Moneyball data point was new appointments attended in my business. And there's a very specific wording there because we played with new appointments. How many new appointments are scheduled, right? And then how many appointments did they go on? And we had all these things, but what we realized was, for example, new appointments scheduled wasn't necessarily a great indicator because anyone can schedule an appointment for anybody. It doesn't mean they're a good prospect. It doesn't mean it all makes sense. And then we thought, okay, well then let's think about this. We're going to say appointments attended. We want our sales guys to go on a bunch of appointments, and we know that we'll have success if they're going on appointments. But what we found out was, and this is like the nuance, right, for the maybe more sophisticated investor team, is our sales guy would maybe go on an appointment. He wouldn't get a contract. He would schedule up a follow-up appointment, and he was counting that appointment as another appointment, right? So how many appointments did you go on? I went on 10. Yeah, but 8 of them were a third appointment, or were you were chasing this lead that wasn't really getting you anywhere. So I want to know from my sales team, how many new appointments are they attending? Not new appointments scheduled, because sometimes they get rescheduled, sometimes they get canceled. New appointments attended is by far the number one indicator of my team's success. And based off that number, I know if we have a problem upstream or downstream. So if we're not going on enough new appointments, then we have a problem with our lead intake. Our phone person is probably not setting enough appointments. There's something they're not doing well on the phone. If we're going on the amount of new appointments, if we're attending the amount of new appointments that we have determined as our number, and we're still not getting the revenue, there's something happening after we're attending appointments. We're not doing good enough follow-up. Our dispo guy's not doing a good job. Something's not happening downstream, right? And so that new appointments attended was a very highly thought about, very important number for us that we have found is the best indicator of success in our business.
Wow, I love that. I really love that. And this is good timing for me. So you were talking about how the challenge of like when you do marketing for someone, how do you sort of parse out? This is actually like, sorry, I'll sort of open the sort of curtain a little bit, and sort of like we recently lost one of our managers. I let him go, right? And great person, really good person, right? Nothing to do with that. But there was a real mismatch of values, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that really bothered me was every time a client didn't have success, this manager would say, well, they're not very good at their business then, right? That was always the reason, always the reason.
Okay.
And I'm open to, sometimes people aren't good at their business. Sometimes I'm not good at my business. Okay, right? It happens. But I was like, but I don't know, this person was successful before you. You know what I mean? Like it just didn't always make sense. And they were never really willing to take responsibility and look at what they could improve, right? So that whole process opened up this whole thing where we really started diving into, well, how do we know we're generating quality leads? Like we could say it, but how do we know it, right? And so we've gone through this sort of iterative process where we're kind of doing a similar thing to what you did, where we're going through and we're saying, what are the things that seem to correlate with deals generated or sort of revenue generated? How do we get that number, right? And the biggest constraint that we actually run into is not so much, what number do we look at? The problem that we primarily deal with is, how do we get accurate data from our clients? Because our clients are like, I'm busy. I don't have time to fill out your spreadsheet. You know what I mean? And they have their own thing. So I've been working on this whole system to automate that as much as possible. Anyway, I love this idea because, like you said, if someone is willing to sit down in their home with a representative from your company, they're interested. Like, they're, no offense, Mike, I love you. And I'm sure everyone that works in your business is amazing. You couldn't pay me enough money to sit down with someone from your company because I don't want to sell my house. And I have a limited time. And it's like, it's never going to happen. But if I needed that, or I was truly motivated, right, I'm going to take that step. That is a hoop people are only going to jump through if there's some level of motivation. So it strikes me as it's kind of a knife that cuts through everything, because it's like, look, if you're sitting down with people, the process to get them on the phone was there. If you're not closing at all, that does kind of indicate that maybe you have an issue kind of down funnel. So that's really, really cool.
If in your business, if your clients have an appointment that they actually hold, the seller holds the appointment and they let them come to their house, you have done everything you can do at that point, I would say, because anything that happens from that point on is out of your hands. It's very hard to find people who, like you said, I would never meet with someone from my company to sell my house either. I would never do it because I don't want to sell my house. So if they're willing to do that, you have like gone a long way to finding the right person. If it doesn't happen from that point, it's usually on the sales process somewhere after that, right? So,
or you might even say, like, maybe the market's shifting or something's happening, right? But it does kind of indicate at least the direction that you can look in, which is, and look, I'll say this too, because KPI are very forefront in my mind. There's a lot of work that I do around KPI, obviously, even within Google Ads. I talk a lot about KPI and what you look at and what you don't. And one of the things that I think is I just hired these new managers, actually. They're both awesome. One's newer, sort of less experienced than the other one. And so I'm doing a lot of mentorship, right? A lot of work with him. And we hired him actually very deliberately because I was like, I don't want someone who has a ton of set in stone ideas. And I don't want a carbon copy of me. I want someone who's going to expand the repertoire of what we can do, right? So there's a lot of time mentoring him. And one of the things that he was talking about was like, well, I don't know. It's not an exact measurement, right? It's not exact. Like there's some confusion. There's some fuzziness here about this number we were talking about. And I was saying, like, the purpose of measuring something is to decrease the degree of uncertainty you have about a decision you want to make. That's the only reason you measure it, right? So all we need to do is get a little less uncertain to have value in the measurement. So even if you don't get 100% there, maybe, new appointments attended is not the end all be all number. It's going to tell you 100% of everything. But it does seem like if you're an investor and you're listening to this, it's going to get you way closer to where you want to be, which is successful, happy. Let me change tacks a little bit. I'm very curious how you think about this because you're a very successful investor. You've been a very successful coach. For people listening to this, Mike is one of the people who every time I meet his coaching students, they're all like very happy, well-adjusted, successful people, which is probably a good sign. So let me ask you this. It's sort of a left turn, but we'll take it there because I'm curious what you're going to say.
Okay.
How do you think about retiring? Do you have any desire to retire? Are you like, I got a date, I'm retiring on this day? Are you going to work forever? Like, what does that look like to you? Or how do you think about it?
So I love talking to you, Dan. Honestly, you ask me questions that are fun for me to answer. I love this kind of stuff. And if you ask my kids and said, what happens when your dad says, or when you say to your dad, hey, I've got a question, I want to know your opinion. I perk up because I love giving my opinion. And I have a lot of opinions about this particular question, retirement. Right. If you would have asked me 10 years ago, I would have said retirement is leaving this company and never having to go to work again, right? Like, I don't want to do anything. That's retirement for me.
This is the automotive company you were working.
Yeah, the automotive company with the waist height walls, and you can hear everyone talking.
A lot of Germans everywhere.
A lot of Germans. Listen, Germans are lovely. Not really. Yeah, they're lovely, but their companies are a bit stilted. Anyways, how do I think about it now? It's funny. I just seriously, one of my kids just asked me this recently. I like what I'm doing so much, and I'm having so much fun that I don't know if I could retire because I always have thoughts of things that I want to try that are fun and exciting for me. So I doubt that I'll ever fully retire, but it's completely out of choice. I think I would be sadder if I had to stop running a business or being involved in business than if you let me keep doing it. So it's by choice. But I'll tell you something that I do well is I compartmentalize really, really well. Something can be going catastrophically bad in my business, but if my wife and I go out to dinner, or if we're like, hey, we're going to watch this movie, I can fully enjoy the movie or the dinner, even though things are falling apart in a different area for me. I'm just really good at compartmentalizing. And so for me, retirement, I'm pretty close to it. My kids jokingly tell me I'm retired already, and I work a lot, but I can go upstairs, and I'm in my office right now. I can go upstairs and just hang out for an hour, and it feels like I'm not really working, but I really am. For me, retirement is not doing anything that when I think about it, I go, ugh. And I still do those things sometimes. But I don't wake up to an alarm ever. So to me, that's like semi-retired right there. I never wake up to an alarm. I start every day with spending time with my wife, having coffee. We have coffee for like literally an hour or two every single day and talk with music on and no distractions. I end the night or end the day with my wife. We usually have a TV show or something that we're watching for an hour or whatever at the end of the night. And I take breaks whenever I want during the day. And I work on 80% of the stuff I work on, I want to be doing. So I'm pretty close to what I consider retirement. Now, I'm putting in enough hours a week where I couldn't really say I'm retired, but I would say working no more on anything, all things combined, 5 to 10 hours a week. That's probably what retirement will look like for me. Whittling down my obligations to 5 to 10 hours total a week is probably where I'll be when I'm retirement. And now I'm probably at like 30 hours a week. I don't know. And probably 20 of those hours I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing. Yeah. And I'm happy to be doing it. It's not painful for me. And there's about 10 hours of work that I would rather not be doing and I need to delegate or eliminate or something, right? But I don't get up to an alarm. I start the day every day with coffee with my wife and I go on vacation whenever I want and I don't worry about money. So I'm pretty close. I mean, if you told me 15 years ago this would be your life, I would freak out. I'd be doing backflips, like going, that is the greatest thing I've ever heard, right? And so now you get to a point where you're like, this is great. I am happy. I'm lucky as can be, but I see how I want to just tweak it to make it 100% perfect for me. But this Moneyball thing we were talking about, or this like one number, the way I look at it is you're at a peak and you can see behind you and you can see forward. So it's not the end all be all, but it gives you clarity. You can see the whole game to understand what needs to be addressed. And for me, I'm so close to where I want to be that I can now see where I'm lacking or where my life is great, but not exactly where I want it to be ultimately. And so I've got a lot of clarity right now in my life about what I want, what's important, what's working, what's not working, what I like and what I don't like. And it's just a matter of just tweaking those little things and it'll be good.
Dude, I love that so much. And it's interesting, right? Like, I feel like you are like mentally, you're sort of where I want to be, right? You're a ways ahead of me, right? But I can see it. I think, when you talk, you can very much get the clarity of vision piece, even though that's not what you're talking about. You can get that from kind of the way that you talk about your business or your personal life or whatever. And I just think it's so awesome. So I'm going to wrap this up because I'm probably going to have you on a third time. I don't know when it's going to happen. It'll probably happen. But this has been so awesome for people that want to know more about you, that want to learn about your coaching programs, the investing that you're doing. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
The best way is to go to MikeSimmons.com. You can find my coaching stuff there. You can find how to contact me there. I also have a podcast. You guys are, listening to a podcast right now. So if you're a podcast listener, it's just easier to go search iTunes or something, or Apple Podcast. You can look for Just Start Real Estate. We mentioned that, right? So I know that's an easy, thing for people if they're already listening to a podcast, Spotify, wherever you're listening to it. Look for Just Start Real Estate. And you can find me there. But if you want to go to MikeSimmons.com, you can find the podcast and everything there. So that's a kind of a one-stop shop.
Yeah, I will link to the podcast and to MikeSimmons.com from AdWordsNerds.com, but whatever, you could just Google it. I always say, we'll put it in the show notes. I'm like, I don't know if people go to find the show. I'm not just Google the thing. You could just Google the name. It's Mike Simmons. It's not the hardest name to spell, but I don't know. Who knows? Look, maybe you got the AdWordsNerds.com bookmarked. I don't want to degrade you too much. But Mike, I just want to say thank you so much for doing this. I am probably at some point just going to sign up for your coaching, even though I'm not a real estate investor, because I already got a ton out of these talks, and I really want to see how your brain works. Thank you so much for coming on, man. This is awesome as always.
I appreciate it. And I super value your friendship. I really do. We've gone for stretches without really communicating too much, just doing our own thing. But every time we get back together and have a conversation, it's like I missed talking to this dude. And I just think you're a ton of fun for me to talk to. So, and I just like talking to people that I enjoy, and you are definitely one of them. So thanks for having me twice. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it was absolutely my pleasure. And we'll do it sooner this time. It won't be 5 years in between.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. I'm on. Whenever you want me, I'm here.
All right. Thanks, Ben. All right. That's going to do it for this week's episode. Look, if you can do us a favor and leave us a review or subscribe or whatever you got to do, wherever you listen to podcasts, it really means means a lot to me because it helps other people find the show. As always, you can find more episodes of the show over at AdWordsNerds.com. And look, I would love for you to talk to our team. right? It's free. We do strategy sessions with folks. We tell you what we would do in your market. We can talk about what we're seeing online right now based on millions of dollars of ad spend. I mean, if you want to learn what's happening online for real estate investors, the best way to do that is to jump on the phone with the team at AdWordsNerds.com. So go there, check it out, check out the other episodes, subscribe, like us, whatever you got to do. Smash the like button, whatever the kids say. But I just want to say right at the end here, I really do appreciate you listening. It means a lot to me. I will be seeing you next week. Have a good one. Cheers.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.